This morning, the sun is shining, the church is full, Jesus Christ is risen. I just don't think it gets any better than this. Now, you can feel, I agree with you. I agree with that. And actually, you can feel the energy we have in this church this morning. So what I want to try to do is harness some of that energy. It is said, and it is true, that sound can actually, at times, shatter glass. It has something to do with the resonance of the glass. If a certain volume of sound can hit glass, and if the glass can vibrate, it probably won't shatter. But if the glass is tight, it doesn't have any flex, it's the right sound coming toward that glass that is tight, it might shatter the glass. So what we're going to try to do this morning, maybe this has been done here before, I don't know. If it has been, and if they were successful, it's never bad to repeat success. But here's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to shatter the glass here in this church. Now, the nice thing is we have replacement insurance. So if we shatter glass, we'll replace it for free. No big deal. So I'm going to say Jesus is risen, and you will say Alleluia, and we'll see if the volume of all the folks in a narthex and inside of the nave of the church, if that volume can shatter all the glass or maybe just one pane. Let's give it a shot. Jesus is risen. Hallelujah. That didn't do it. Jesus is risen. Hallelujah. Oh, yeah, maybe it was a little louder. Jesus is risen. That didn't do it. That didn't work. You know, as Jesus Christ is alive, and Jesus obviously, and we celebrate Resurrection Sunday today. So the big question to ask is, where is Jesus? You see, I remember when I was young, and the nuns used to ask the question, and they would give the question first, where is God? And the answer everyone would give is, God is everywhere. Where is Jesus? Jesus is God, so Jesus is everywhere. But I'm not sure if that is the case. That seemed like a great answer, but I think that might be erroneous. You see, if God isn't in your heart, then he isn't in your life and he isn't in your soul. If you're driving down the road and someone pulls out in front of you and you gesture negatively to that person, clearly then Jesus wasn't in your car, he isn't in your heart at that very moment. You know, there were these two little boys, Jimmy and Johnny. They're cute little fellas, but Jimmy and Johnny, they just had this incredible way of driving their mom just insane. These guys were incorrigible. Jesus is risen. Hallelujah. Jesus is risen. Hallelujah. Jesus is risen. Hallelujah. That still didn't work. Anyway, Jimmy and Johnny, these guys were incorrigible. Two nice little boys. They were cute, but that's where it stopped. And she just had a hard time ruling Jimmy and Johnny. So finally she thought to herself, as a last resort, I'm going to go down and see the parish priest. Maybe Father will be kind enough to talk to my boys. Maybe he'll talk some sense, some wisdom into my two sons, Jimmy and Johnny. So Mom went down to see the parish priest. She said, Father, would you be willing to talk to my two sons? The priest said, sure, I'll do that. How about tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Good, Father, I'll bring the boys down here tomorrow morning at 10. Well, the next day, 10 o'clock, she shows up with Jimmy and Johnny. She walks into the church office. She introduces Jimmy and Johnny to Father. And the priest said to the mom, you stay right here in the waiting room. I'm going to take Jimmy and Johnny into my office and have a talk with these two fellas. So Jimmy and Johnny walk into the priest's office. These guys they're pretty scared at this point. So the priest asks them to sit down. The priest gets on the other side of his big desk with that big chair. He sits in a big chair, and he looks at Jimmy and Johnny, and he said, Jimmy and Johnny, where is God? Well, they looked at each other. They didn't know. So Father said to Jimmy and Johnny again, Jimmy and Johnny, where is God? And they kept looking at each other. They still didn't have an answer. And Father said to Jimmy and Johnny, he said, guys, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you that question one more time. I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come up with an answer, and then I'll come back into the room, and I want to hear your answer. So guys, before I leave, I ask you, where is God? Then the priest got up and he left his office. And Jimmy looked at Johnny and said, uh-oh, God's missing, and I think Father wants to blame us. But you know, obviously, many times in our lives, God is missing. Jesus is missing. If you don't allow him in your heart and in your life, on any given day, any given moment, any given hour, he isn't there. So when a question is asked, where is God, where is Jesus? The answer everywhere, no. No, that doesn't work. That isn't the answer. God is, and Jesus is, wherever you want him. And God isn't wherever you don't want him. If you were at the store and some complete stranger was looking right at you, would they be able to say, that man right there, that man's a Christian? Because I heard him speak, I heard him talk, I watched him gesture, and his attitude, his attributes, they're so Christian, it's unbelievable. That's a Christian. I don't know his name, but that's a Christian. If you're in a store somewhere and a complete stranger looks at you, will they say, I don't know the man's name, but I know this much, that guy is not a Christian. Because I heard him speak and tell a dirty joke. I watched him gesture, which wasn't appropriate. I don't know who he is, but he's not a Christian. You see, here's what happens. Every one of us in church this morning, probably the vast majority Catholics. We might have visitors who are not Catholic. Welcome. Glad that you're here this morning. But every one of us, we are ambassadors for Christ. If the message of Christ is to be felt out in the workplace, out in the world, it's up to you. You have to take Christ out in the world. You are Christ's feet, you are his legs, you are his arms, you are his voice. Christ needs to work through you. Where is God? Well, God is where we want him to be. And God isn't where we don't want him to be. I hope that as we leave this Easter Sunday Mass, that God and Jesus is in your heart and in your words, in your speech, in your actions. Because if he isn't, what an ugly world this can turn out to be. And if he is, what a beautiful world we're going to have. Let's try it again. Jesus is risen. Now, here's what we want to do. Before I move to the rest of it, we got to really kick this up, okay? There's folks in the back, there's folks right here. Just put it on number 10 on a volume scale and really let me have it. Jesus is risen. A little louder. Jesus is risen. Everything you have, let's pop these windows. Jesus is risen.